What if I told you that the way most older men masturbate is actually making things worse? That the quick, habitual motion you've used for decades may be silently dulling your sensation, weakening your erections, and even shortening your sexual lifespan? It's a tough truth, but one that could change everything if you're willing to listen. Because here's the reality. Most men over 60 have never been taught how to adapt their most private habits to the changes their bodies naturally go through. And because of that, they're missing out on some of the most powerful, satisfying, and revitalizing pleasure they've ever had. I'm Dr. Mohit Kara, a urologist and men's health expert with over 30 years of clinical experience. I've helped thousands of men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond rediscover energy, confidence, and connection without pills, without surgery, and without shame. What I'll share with you today isn't theory. It's a set of proven principles that have changed lives. You see, there's a paradox that very few people talk about. As your body ages, your capacity for deeper, longer-lasting pleasure doesn't go away. It actually expands, but only if you know how to access it. That's what this video is all about. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal 7 masturbation secrets older men were never taught. Techniques backed by science, shaped by real experience, and designed specifically for the mature male body. And by the end, I'll introduce you to a natural method that could completely transform your intimacy, circulation, and even the way you feel in your skin. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, you'll never miss powerful, age-specific health advice designed to help you feel stronger, more confident, and more connected. And if this message resonates with you, type 1 in the comments. If it doesn't, type 0, and let me know how I can make these insights even more helpful for you. All right, let's begin with the first secret, one that surprises nearly every man I've ever worked with. It has nothing to do with pills, devices, or techniques you see in magazines. In fact, it starts with something much simpler and far more powerful: your attention. Because the truth is, most older men rush through self-pleasure out of habit without ever realizing that slowing down and being fully present can completely change the experience. This is where transformation begins. Secret 1. Mindfulness makes it magical. If I could go back in time and tell every older man just one thing about pleasure, it would be this: slow down. Truly slow down. You see, for most of us, masturbation was something learned in secrecy. It was fast, hidden, rushed. It became a habit built for speed, not satisfaction. And for decades, we carried that same rushed pattern into adulthood and beyond. But what no one ever told us is that the body you have at 65, 70, or even 80 doesn't want speed. It wants presence. It wants awareness. It wants to be touched with intention. I remember speaking with a patient, 74 years old, retired engineer. He told me he hadn't felt real satisfaction from self-pleasure in years, not because he didn't try, but because it always left him feeling flat. When I guided him through mindful self-touch, slower breathing, paying attention to forgotten areas of his body, exploring without expectation, he broke down in tears. "I didn't know my body could still feel like this," he said, and he's not alone. When you shift from goal-oriented to sensation-oriented, everything changes. Your breath deepens. Your body responds differently. Nerves that have gone quiet start to awaken. Areas you used to overlook become sources of warmth, tingling, even full-body waves. This isn't about fantasy or performance. It's about connection to yourself, to your energy, to the quiet joy that lives under the surface when you give it room to emerge. And here's the science behind it. When you're mindful, your body releases more oxytocin, less cortisol. That means deeper pleasure, reduced stress, and a longer-lasting glow. It turns what used to be a moment of release into an experience of renewal. So, if you've ever wondered whether your best days of pleasure are behind you, I want you to know they might actually just be beginning. But to get there, you have to be willing to touch differently, breathe deeper, and let the journey matter more than the finish line. Now, if that surprised you, wait until you hear how the time of day you choose to pleasure yourself can radically change everything you feel. If you're still here and these insights are resonating with you, go ahead and type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're following along and getting value from this. Now, let's keep going and dive into the second secret. Secret 2. Timing is everything. One of the most overlooked factors in male pleasure, especially as we get older, is timing. Not technique, not frequency, just when you do it. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't always believe it made that much of a difference either. But over the years, after listening to hundreds of patients and digging into the research, I saw a clear pattern. Older men who align their self-pleasure with their body's natural hormonal rhythms consistently report stronger erections, deeper sensations, and more emotional satisfaction. The truth is, your body's clock has shifted. Back in your 20s, your testosterone levels peaked early in the morning. That's why morning wood was so common. It was biology doing its job. But as we age, that hormonal peak drifts. By the time you hit your 60s or 70s, the new sweet spot for sexual activity is often between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. That's when your testosterone stabilizes, your mind is clearer, and your energy is more available. I had one gentleman, 68 years old, who told me his solo time was always late at night, just before bed, but he felt disconnected, like his body wasn't responding the way it used to. I asked him to shift his time to late morning, just for a week. He called me 2 days later and said, "Doc, I didn't realize how much my body was just waiting for me to listen." That's the key. Listening. Because pleasure isn't just physical, it's about rhythm. It's about showing up when your body is most ready to receive. And when you start honoring that timing, everything starts to flow more naturally. Now, if timing can make that big of a difference, imagine what happens when you pair it with an environment that amplifies sensation instead of suppressing it. The next secret reveals just how much your surroundings shape your most intimate experiences, and how a few small changes can unlock entirely new levels of pleasure. Secret 3. Your environment shapes your experience. Most men don't think twice about their environment when it comes to pleasure. We're creatures of habit. Bedroom, bathroom, maybe under the covers with the door locked, just to feel a little bit of privacy. But what I've learned, both from science and from listening to my older patients, is that the space around you has a much deeper impact on your sexual experience than you might expect, especially as you age. Your younger self may have been turned on by quick visual cues, a fast fantasy, or even just a flash of memory. But as we grow older, our arousal patterns shift. Touch becomes more meaningful. Comfort becomes more essential, and the sensory world around us, the warmth of a room, the scent in the air, the texture of sheets, starts to matter in ways it never did before. I remember one man, 72 years old, who told me his pleasure felt numb. Not broken, just dull. I asked him what his environment was like. He shrugged. Cold bathroom, fluorescent light, locked door. I suggested he try something different. A warm room, around 75 to 78 degrees. Dim lighting. Maybe a scent like sandalwood or vanilla, both proven to increase male arousal. Just a few small changes. The next time we spoke, he said, "It felt like my body finally said yes." Your brain responds to signals of safety, of comfort, of richness. And when your environment supports that, arousal becomes easier, deeper, more immersive. Think of it as preparing the stage before the performance. You deserve more than just going through the motions. You deserve to be surrounded by something that invites you into the moment. But here's something even more powerful. What if I told you that the technique you've used your entire life might actually be working against the way your body wants to be touched now? That what used to bring release is now holding you back from something far more satisfying? In the next secret, we'll uncover exactly how to change that. Secret 4. Rediscover the way you touch yourself. If you're like most men, the way you touch yourself today is probably not much different from how you did it at 16. Quick, repetitive, focused almost entirely on the same few spots. It's no one's fault. That's how most of us learned. No guidebook, no conversation, just instinct and urgency. But here's the truth. The body you have now is not the same body you had back then. It's wiser, more complex, and it deserves a technique that reflects that. I once had a patient, a 66-year-old retired firefighter, who told me, "I don't know, doc. It just doesn't feel the same anymore." I asked him to describe how he masturbated. It was the same old grip, the same up and down rhythm, always straight to the finish. I introduced him to just a few changes, using his non-dominant hand to vary sensation, applying a lighter touch, adding pressure to the frenulum, and experimenting with rhythm shifts. A week later, he called me and said, "That was the first time in years I didn't want it to end." Your body responds to variety. Just like your taste buds, your nerve endings get bored with repetition. Try changing the pressure throughout, going from light to firm. Slow your pace. Try circular or spiral strokes instead of linear ones. And don't underestimate the power of simply switching hands. It lights up new nerve pathways in your brain. Techniques like the ring method, where you trap blood in the shaft for a firmer erection, or stimulating secondary areas like your inner thighs or the perineum, can completely transform your experience. And then there's rhythm, an area most men never explore. Instead of staying steady, allow yourself to build, pause, shift. Think of it like music. The most beautiful melodies aren't one note played over and over. They rise and swell and soften. That's where deeper pleasure lives. Now imagine combining that refined technique with an entirely new map of pleasure zones you may not even know exist. In the next secret, we'll uncover parts of your body that can unlock sensations more powerful than you ever expected. Secret 5. Discover new pleasure zones. One of the most powerful changes that comes with age is how your body responds to touch. What used to work might not hit the same way anymore, and that can be frustrating, until you realize it's not a loss, it's an invitation. Because the truth is, as testosterone shifts and nerve sensitivity evolves, new areas of the body begin to awaken. You're not losing pleasure, you're gaining access to different places that are waiting to be explored. I remember talking with a gentleman in his early 70s. He had been struggling with a sense of disconnection during self-pleasure. "It just feels flat," he said. So I asked him to try something he'd never done before. Skip direct stimulation for the first 5 minutes. Instead, explore the inner thighs. Use soft touch on the lower abdomen. Gently press along the perineum, the area between the scrotum and anus. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he promised he'd give it a shot. 2 weeks later, he was glowing. "Doc, I felt things I've never felt in my life," he said. "It was like my whole body lit up." There's real science behind that. As the body matures, lesser-known nerve pathways become more responsive. Gentle pressure in areas that were once overlooked, hips, inner knees, even the lower back, can create a cascade of pleasure. And don't be surprised if areas that once felt too sensitive when you were younger now feel just right. The map of pleasure shifts over time. You just have to be willing to explore it. And when you combine this kind of exploration with improved circulation and intentional preparation, the results can be extraordinary. Which brings us to the next secret, a method I've shared with hundreds of men that can naturally enhance sensation, erection quality, and energy, often within just a few sessions. It's called the circulation revival method, and you'll want to hear every step. Secret 6. Activate the circulation revival method. If there's one thing I wish more men over 60 understood, it's that pleasure isn't just about stimulation, it's about blood flow. Without good circulation, even the most refined techniques or well-timed sessions can fall flat. That's where the circulation revival method comes in. I've taught this approach to countless men in my practice, and the results often surprise them, not just in sensation, but in how energized and alive they feel afterward. It starts with preparation. Most men never think about what they're doing before they touch themselves, but those moments leading up to it can be the key to unlocking deeper pleasure. Begin with hydration. A full glass of water with a pinch of natural salt boosts blood volume and helps your body deliver oxygen-rich blood where you need it most. About 90 minutes before, eat something that supports circulation: dark chocolate, watermelon, pistachios. These aren't just snacks, they're tools. Then, move your body. Just 5 minutes of brisk walking, stair climbing, or even light stretches primes your vascular system. Follow that with deep, rhythmic breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. This calms your nervous system and heightens your awareness. Just before you begin, take a few minutes to gently massage key areas: your inner thighs, your lower abdomen, and the creases where your legs meet your pelvis. These areas house major blood vessels and nerve pathways. Warming them up prepares your entire pelvic region for richer sensation. When men follow this sequence, they often describe the experience as more intense, more connected, and even more youthful. One man in his late 60s told me it felt like he'd flipped a switch in his body that had been turned off for years. And yet, even with all this, the preparation, the timing, the touch, there's one final piece of the puzzle that most men resist: accepting and adapting to the changes of aging. But what if those changes weren't limitations, but gateways to something even better? Let's talk about that next. Secret 7. Adapt with age. Don't fight it. There's a moment in every man's life when he starts to notice things changing. The response time is slower. The intensity isn't quite the same. The body doesn't do what it used to do, at least not on command. And for so many men, that moment triggers a quiet panic. They either double down, trying to force their way back to how things were, or they give up altogether, thinking pleasure is something that just fades away with age. But it doesn't have to be that way, not even close. The most powerful shift happens when you stop trying to recreate the past and instead learn to work with the body you have today. Your arousal pattern may take longer now, but that's not a flaw, it's an opportunity. The plateau phase, that beautiful stretch of high arousal before climax, naturally becomes longer and more accessible with age. And when you stop rushing, when you really settle into that space, it can feel better than anything you remember from your younger years. I've had men in their 70s tell me they've started experiencing orgasms without even ejaculating. Waves of pleasure that radiate through their whole body, leaving them calm, fulfilled, and completely alive. These are experiences most never thought were even possible, but they are. You just have to let go of what used to be and lean into what is. Even physical changes like reduced sensitivity or slower recovery aren't problems. They're simply signals. They're invitations to explore, to use lubricants that enhance sensation, to shift positions, to discover new pathways of connection. This is the season of refinement, not decline. And now that you've seen these 7 secrets, you might be wondering, how do I bring it all together? How do I take these insights and turn them into a new way of living, not just during self-pleasure, but in how I show up every single day? Let's wrap up with that. Conclusion. If there's one thing I hope you take away from these 7 secrets, it's this. Your capacity for pleasure doesn't disappear with age. It simply changes form. And when you stop fighting that change and start leaning into it, something incredible happens. You reconnect with parts of yourself you thought were gone. You feel more present, more grounded, more alive. You've learned how slowing down, choosing the right time, and creating the right environment can reshape your experience. You've seen how new techniques and unexplored pleasure zones can bring back excitement. You've discovered that with better circulation and the willingness to adapt, what once felt routine can become extraordinary again. I've seen men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s rediscover parts of themselves they thought had faded away. And I believe, with everything I know as a doctor and everything I've witnessed as a human being, you can too. This isn't about chasing the past. It's about owning the present, with clarity, with intention, with joy. So start where you are. Be curious, be kind to your body, and remember, the best chapter doesn't always come at the beginning. Sometimes it's the one you're writing right now.